Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Covenant Cast, where we discuss the past, present, and future of the tabletop gaming industry. I'm Zach.
And I'm Steven, and we're talking about some big news that has happened recently in the space, particularly for collectible games, which do drive a lot of the dollars that get spent in the
Just the
tabletop
industry.
market as a whole, and local stores specifically. This is TCGPlayer, a longtime marketplace for singles and sealed product for those collectible games, buying Channel Fireball, which was a longtime producer of content, event management, and then got into the marketplace game themselves. So big moves. I think Zach and I have probably different things that are interesting about this, and we hope you join us. Stay tuned.
So, if you heard the intro and you thought, mergers and acquisitions, I'm sure this discussion is going to be enthralling. You were right, because I think this is going to be really good. If you hear me sipping on something throughout the podcast, I want to warn. I know this is an audio experience happening right now, but I do have a fresh cup of tea, and it's very hot.
Cup of tea.
And I can't help but try to drink it. So if you hear sipping noises, I apologize.
It's
just
English
what it's going to be.
breakfast, right?
English
Has
breakfast tea.
caffeine in it.
Right. It does have caffeine. It's
Yeah.
just got less caffeine than coffee, which I've been on. This is just total. We don't normally rabbit trail on the podcast as hard as we do the stream. So
Well, it's kind of an inevitability, though.
new
isn't it?
territory for me. But yeah, I've been exploring life without coffee.
You've been exploring life without a lot of things.
I really have. Yeah.
What have you given up at this point? And what's your average daily diet? How has it changed? You cut out a lot of meat.
I did. Not all meat, no. So I, back in November, December, started exploring a whole food plant-based diet.
Mm-hmm. WFPB.
Just interested in, I don't know, being informed and seeing how I feel when I change things about what I'm eating and how I'm sleeping and exercising and all that kind of stuff. And so I had have a new doctor who was recommending this as a way. I have a lot of family, as they get older, they have a lot of issues that I'd rather not have. So anyways, it's really simple, honestly, on the diet side. It's like, as much as possible, fruits, vegetables, grains that aren't highly processed, or a lot of avoiding added sugar, avoiding meats and cheeses and that kind of stuff. So
all the fun stuff.
yeah, so I basically cut meat out of, like, and this was the goal from the end. So one of the things I like about it is it's not like being keto, where as soon as you like have something with sugar in it, if you're trying to reach ketosis, wrecked. Like it's just a zero-sum game, right? It's like you either win or you lose, and there's nothing in between. Anyways, so it's kind of there's a scale. The less meat you're eating, likely the lower cholesterol is going to be, the lower risk of heart disease, all that kind of stuff when you get older. So I started really slow, taking it one step at a time. I wanted to see if I could replace my breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
Start there.
And that's where the overnight oats
phenomenon
comes from.
Anyway, so I got COVID about a month ago, I guess. And I was 6 or 7 days into that experience. That was crazy, when I realized that I hadn't had coffee at all. And I think we all lie to ourselves in certain ways. In my mind, I was having a couple cups of coffee a day.
Mm-hmm.
But it just depends, right? You have a couple, and then you're making a fresh brew for the stream. It's like, well, I guess I guess.
Yeah, have a little pip. Yeah.
Or, like I'm going to, like I'm hanging out with my mom after the stream. She's like, yeah, you want to grab a coffee? It's like, I guess I'll. Anyways, it escalates.
It's a social reality. Yeah.
And the pandemic helped this. It's a crazy time. 2020 was an intense year for us here. And I think I just got to the point where I was nervous to stop, because I was like, I feel like it's going to be really miserable when I do. But I was 6 or 7 days into COVID, already feeling miserable.
You're miserable in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah. And so it was like, all right. And it was always in my mind that I wanted to try to go a month without coffee and to see how it feels. Because I do love coffee, just the taste of it.
But you always have.
Yeah.
You love Starbucks and the idea of that, and then all the local coffee shops and the nice espresso experience, these kinds of things.
Yeah. So it just felt like a good time to try it and explore a new space. And it was some crazy stuff happened. I started dreaming really heavily, like for the first time in a long time.
That's pretty interesting.
My energy levels are definitely different than they've been. I do miss the taste of coffee. The next experiment, of course, like any good science experiment, you remove a variable, then you put it back in, you slowly introduce it. I think ideally I would be at like 3 to 5 cups of coffee a week, that kind of a thing. But it's not like if I run out of coffee beans at home on Saturday, I'm like going to be sick or something.
Yeah. That's a good. It's always good just to keep that middle path open. Where just make sure anything that might be a little extreme, just cut it out for a little bit and just make sure, just kind of reset things. The same thing with drinks. I've been significantly cutting back
at like the same time
on alcohol consumption. Well, I think it's linked to COVID too. I was in the same way. I was 5-6 days in, and it's like, I was having there was like Wednesday nights, maybe a couple of drinks, and on the weekend, Shannon and I would have a couple of drinks together.
Sure.
Like a Saturday night or it's Friday night, and then sometimes it's Friday night and Saturday night, and then pretty soon it's like, it's 6 or 7 drinks a week, like maybe too many. And it's not like we're drinking to excess on individual nights, but just if you add it up over time, you get that light buzz going,
and what that could potentially do to your body.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely not really recommended. So cut back on that too. And same thing. It's like got back into exercise, cut back on that. Just like, and I'm sure I'll go back the other direction for a time, get into the winter season, really enjoy the Epicurean delights that await with baking and roasting. And of course, having that glass of red wine, et cetera, et cetera.
I feel like giving up hot coffee in July is much easier than giving up cocktails
probably
in the summer.
Well, and I think
so. Kudos to you.
This is something that I've really come around on as my 35-year-old wisdom, I would say.
Presidential wisdom, we'll call it.
Yeah, I used to think that whenever I was making a change in my life, I was aiming for the change to be permanent. Right? It was like, okay, this is the kind of person I'm going to be for the rest of my life. So if I cut out alcohol, I'm not drinking. Like I'm a non-drinking person now. And then if I go back on that, I feel bad about myself because I let myself down. I fell into the trap ultimately, or I would start exercising, Tuesdays and Thursdays, which is what I'm doing currently. And then it's like I'd miss a Tuesday, and then it'd be like I'd miss a Thursday, and then it'd be like I stopped exercising, and then it's like, oh man, I let myself down again. But I've just accepted the cyclical nature of it. Like ideally you have a routine that you go through 365 days out of the year. But the reality of the human psyche and my own psychology is that I will have periods of harvest. I will have periods of, stocking up. And those periods are going to come and go. And just kind of accepting and ride the wave more than trying to control it day by day.
I think kind of a macro level, at least, while it seems inconsistent day to day, it's really consistent year to year or decade to decade, right? Yeah. Where I think it's important just to remember we are human. Yeah. And that's where, for me, I think I could, if I really wanted to, never have coffee again.
Yeah.
I just don't want to.
Right. I love it. It's one of the great universal social experiences across a vast number of cultures.
Yeah.
And really hot drink in the morning is kind of 100% there. Different cultures, will do like tea or coffee or various things. Even I have an yerba mate thing at home that I'm about to start trying because apparently it's a different vibe too. It's a type of tea. It's like South American. And you see them with the little gourds and they have the straw in the gourds. Yeah. And apparently it's a caffeinated experience as well, but it's apparently very different. It's like a different kind of caffeine buzz or high or whatever. So like you said, I like coffee. I like cocktails. I like eating great food that tastes excellent and that is made like with care the old-fashioned way, which is you can't do that day to day because you will absolutely have too many calories in the wrong places. But it's not about total abstinence. It's just kind of respecting it. Sometimes it's a little heavier. Sometimes it's way lighter. So I'm looking forward to your journey back to coffee so we can have a real understanding of the cycle of nothing to back into something.
I watched a lot of videos when I was on my COVID break, my forced time off.
And fever dreams, yeah.
Well, about what happens to your body when you stop drinking coffee, and then what happens if you start again, and what that looks like. I'm really interested to see how it goes because when your body gets used to it, if you're 2 or 3 cups a day forever, but then when you reintroduce it, like you have a cup of coffee, apparently it's crazy. It's like you realize, you realize what's happening to your body, and then you recognize that you were doing that to your body so often that it was numb to that experience.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if I like coffee in that version, I might have a cup and be like, I'm done.
Yeah, it might be a little espresso cup of
Yeah.
coffee, and it's like, okay, I've had enough. All that to say, TCG Player buying Channel Fireball,
down
of
to
course.
business.
Let's get down to it. You talked about mergers and acquisitions, so for me, here's my direction on this. When I see an announcement like this, I think TCG Player is already a fairly monolithic marketplace that we've actually had more experience with and understanding of in the past probably 3 to 4 years than we ever have, because we're in the flesh and blood space, which means we're now in the TCG space.
Yeah.
And
We kind of dipped our toe with Destiny.
correct me if I'm wrong. Was Destiny on TCG Player?
Yeah.
The platform?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
It did get added?
Yep.
I wasn't sure because I didn't really have to pay attention to it. You know, we were on the Saga set train. We were kind of doing a different vibe. But now it's all very price sensitive, right? And so we look when we're pricing singles, like what's the market say? And the market says go to TCG Player and find out. Same with booster boxes. How's Uprising doing? How's Tales of Aria doing?
Yeah.
These kinds of things.
Well,
So we're more aware of it than ever.
I feel like TCG Player, for if you're unfamiliar with them, is very much a centralized market for like boxes and singles. And it's not the de facto. Sometimes, a lot of times actually, like if you're savvy at this, and I'll make 2 points here before we get back to your macro thing, is if you're savvy, you know the places to look to understand the actual value of these things. So sold transactions on TCG Player. You also go to eBay, look at sold transactions. You can go to Discord channels and various Facebook groups and see what the most recent time that thing has sold for and how much it is. So, it's because that thing may be listed at $500, but it's not worth $500 unless someone's willing to pay $500 for that item, which leaves my second thing that is worth just clarifying is that the collectible games, pieces for these collectible games, cards in this case, are very similar and treated very similarly to almost like stocks or assets.
For sure.
I mean, they are assets. They're actual, genuine assets. This is just a marketplace for it. And so, obviously, it's a small marketplace, very finite, and it's very unregulated. Like, compared to stocks, there's rules. Well, apparently there are rules. We're not sure if there are actually rules anymore about buying, selling. As far as I know, there's no company offering the ability to short or put any of these assets or whatever.
Yeah.
But there are people who their entire experience with collectible games. So there's categories we always talk about. There's players. That's pretty easy to understand. People are buying these things to use. And if they have something they don't want, or maybe they decide they don't want anything anymore, you can actually sell it. You can trade it. You can do something with it. There's collectors who, kind of like baseball cards, are just trying to get sets of things, things, right?
Baseball cards or like old records.
Comic books.
Records are a really good example in this space too, because there's a limited number that were printed, like the first print of a Bob Marley, first edition or whatever. And there might be 500 that were printed, and they're all in various places across the world in various conditions. And so like it's just like baseball cards, right? As you're evaluating, like, what do I have here? It's like, what does it look like? Is it, is it graded? So like, does it have a near mint grade? Does it have a mint grade, et cetera? And then I can put it on a marketplace and find out what it's worth, basically, and sell it. So yeah, so records are an example. Trading cards are an example. Trading cards or baseball cards are a little overt because we're already talking about cards.
Yeah.
So you realize it's everywhere, right? Old cars can be this way. I've had to really appreciate what collectibles are in my head.
People collect books, first printings. There's
Yeah,
limited
books, great
edition
example,
Star
of
Wars
course.
stuff all the time that people collect.
Yeah.
But so you have collectors who a big part of why they're interested in all this stuff is just the chase and the completion of things. You reference your dad all the time,
He's
and his
big into
baseball
that,
cards and stuff.
yeah.
But then the third that we've most recently, so like in Destiny days, I was aware of players and collectors. And what I wasn't aware is the third category is investors or speculators, right? And you can call them whatever you want, but the people that are here financially. They're, as an example, you could go look and say, hey, I think this card's underpriced. And for whatever reason, it's really rare. I think there's going to be some people really want 10 years from now, maybe 2 months from now.
Or maybe there's just only been 5 of them made.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what it is or what it's used for. If it's that rare, it's that rare.
They're not intending to play with it. They're not getting joy out of collecting. They're just here to buy the thing they think will be worth more later.
Yeah, line goes up, man.
Yeah. All that to say, TCG Player, centralized market for singles for a lot of collectible games, and also for the ability to sell booster boxes. Carry on.
So what I'm most curious about in this entire thing is that TCGPlayer gets the content side of Channel Fireball, which is fine. Apparently it's in Magic. There's some interest in that.
I feel like the content side of Channel Fireball is actually one of the oldest and biggest pieces of that pie.
It is. Yeah. Now, I'm, what do you call it whenever you're like, you don't think it's going to be long-term successful? Is that bullish or bearish?
Bearish.
Okay.
Yeah. Bull's horns go up.
I'm bearish on paying for content as a whole, paying for blogs, basically, access to blogs.
You're bearish on content behind paywalls.
Yes. So I think just as people are, even now, just way more able to post anything they want and to have podcasts and to post YouTube videos, that technology, all of the barrier on that is so low that there are always going to be good enough players creating free content that you can get basically all the value you would get out of a paid. And that's why we have never done it. I could be wrong about that, of course, but that's kind of my take on that.
One of the reasons.
So for me, I wouldn't put a whole lot of value on that part of the deal. The second part of the deal is the event management thing, which I would put a good amount of value on that because that is a huge skill set. I'm sure that brings in lots of contracts with existing venues.
Yep.
I'm sure it brings in X number of years already of venues and events that are planned out, ready to go. And that is a very unique space that Channel Fireball is currently rocking.
For awareness, Channel Fireball just got announced is hosting the Flesh and Blood World Championship in California later this year. They've hosted several of the call-ins or national championships or that kind of stuff. And these are events with thousands of people coming, paying.
Everything I've been to has been CFB.
I went to
Star City
Games,
which is like their main competitor, I think, in the space.
Yeah, one of.
So they've got that side of it, which is nice because TCGPlayer now gets to enter a space that is much harder to enter than content.
Yeah.
Content's easy. You just have to find the right authors and pay them more. But the other side of this is the events, and that is a big thing. And they'll start wearing their TCGPlayer shirts, and it makes sense. I think the brand is really strong in that all these TCG events are being run by a company called TCGPlayer. That's nice. But then finally, I think the maybe the biggest thing here is that binder POS system, which Channel Fireball is bringing, to the party.
Because Channel Fireball bought it.
They bought Binder POS, yeah. And I think and we are unexperienced, we've not touched Binder POS, but point of sale, which means it's a point of sale system for local stores, where whenever a transaction is happening between a customer and a retail store, it's going to track your inventory. It's going to automatically deduct quantities. It's going to hold all of your pricing information. It's a way to track and manage all of your inventory and then sell it to others like Square or anything like that. Go ahead.
I was going to say they offer some really specific, because you can imagine binder point of sale.
Singles, right?
Yeah, very specifically useful tools for people selling individual cards. I just pulled up their website real quick. One of the things that I quickly saw was a singles database. Yeah. So it says never manually price a card again, fully automated.
Yeah.
So I assume it's basing it on transaction history, and you can like match this price, beat it by whatever. So if you have tens of thousands of singles for Magic, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, etc., an automated system that just handles your inventory and tells you what they think you should price it at and sell it and all that stuff is like huge cost savings.
Yeah, that's really handy. And it might already be integrated with TCGPlayer for that, And so that might be a really natural transition because they might be reading prices from TCGPlayer anyway to get those prices that they can then match on the POS. And this is really fascinating. And this is where I think the most interesting part of the conversation is, not because of any specifics of, are they going to make their profit share increase because of a binder POS system or whatever. But what this really means is we have now a monolithic kind of vertical integration from local retail store to online marketplace that is controlled by the same organization. So now TCGPlayer is basically hosting thousands of retail stores that can more or less instantly integrate with it and list all of their inventory on the TCGPlayer marketplace, which is effectively an online store. It's an online marketplace. So what this does is that we've not had, it started to happen more and more, but there was a time where eBay was the only place where you might see collectibles like this for sale online. There wasn't the big, and then stores started getting into singles and they started hosting those online. But this is like one or two stores big enough, like us with the spoils, right? You post them up there, and maybe you go to different websites that are also selling singles, but you can't really know what the local store is selling them for. In California, you're selling them for this on online in Tulsa. There's kind of a scattered net of information. But then TCGPlayer gets into the game, and now more and more information starts to bubble up. You can see what all these different retail stores across the country, even across the world potentially, are selling these products for. And as more and more people are selling the same products, obviously competition keeps driving price down, price down, price down. So what we're seeing, I think, for the first time, and this is going to exacerbate that transition, is all collectibles of a certain caliber or a certain just a significance. So Magic all the way down to whatever your kind of mid-tier collectible game is. All of these products and goods are available at one place with a complete appreciation of lowest price anywhere in the world. And that changes the game for sure, for collectibles and just for retail stores and for online stores, where now suddenly really the lowest price is a question across, let's say, 2,000 different entities, and it's right here in front of you, versus, maybe back in the day, if you will, you might have to check 20 different websites to find the best price. And it's like, oh, they're way underpriced, I'm going to go snipe it there.
And a lot of times you just wouldn't.
And you just wouldn't. No,
there are people that would do that.
Yeah, there's like one store, and it's like, I just shop here, and they usually have pretty good prices.
And it's like if you're buying $10 worth of cards.
Now it's perfect information, man. Mm-hmm. It's perfect information. So if you miss on a print run, those booster boxes are showing up on TCGPlayer for $50. If you have a single card that's extremely rare, you can probably see about how many there are in the world at any given moment on this TCGPlayer marketplace.
So how does the acquisition make that happen?
I think what it's going to do is it's going to get more retailers into that pipeline, whereas previously it was like, I can do binder POS, I can then host my inventory in TCGPlayer, or maybe I'm using a different POS system, but I put my inventory in TCGPlayer, or maybe Channel Fireball was doing a marketplace, maybe I'm going to put it up there, or maybe it's all just too much work to like do all of this. But if TCGPlayer can come in here with all of this integration and say to a retail store with a very low amount of effort, you can start selling all your products online. Period.
Yeah.
And like we're the biggest marketplace for it. We have a ton of sales. Look at all this stuff.
The other point is you have the POS system.
Yeah.
Like you integrate it. It saves you time. You can do all this stuff. Go.
And you imagine the tools that come from the POS being integrated with TCGPlayer Marketplace. Now they can just link those up fully. And that's going to make things easier for retail stores. So, people, I think it's probably a turnkey solution is the term we're looking for here, is that you can go to a retail store, you can call them up and say, hey, do you have any online sales? Like, no. It's like, we can get you set up. We can handle all your POS, your inventory needs, your singles needs, and you will increase your sales because suddenly your products are available worldwide. And that used to be a heavier lift, right? You used to have to host a website and figure out your e-commerce platform and these kinds of things. So it's just easier and easier and easier for retailers to be online. What does that do for a collectibles market when all the unknowns continue to shrink and fade away and there's no mystery anymore?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it means, but I can't help but think it's going to make things all way less expensive.
So, which from a player side may seem great.
Absolutely. It's like the emperor has no clothes at a certain point, right? It's like, wait a minute, there was actually 16,000 of this card. Based on the limited information we all had, we thought there was maybe 800. But now you see there are 16,000 listings right here, all in one place.
Yeah, and there's a lot of as they would call knock-on effects here. That it really, when you see someone like TCGPlayer, obviously they've been growing for a long time. They were already somewhat established as like it. From everything I can see, usually they're the reference point for what the price of something is. Singles, at least for Fab, and I assume. Is true for Magic. There could be lots of competitors in the Magic space that I'm not aware of because it's just not a space I'm operating in. But when you start seeing them acquiring things, right, and getting bigger, and Channel Fireball is not a small entity or brand. Right. They're a pretty well-known brand, like you said, in the event hosting space, the content space. They were attempting to enter the market space like TCGPlayer had. And so, this is a common move you see from, I forget the first person to market to do it, to
The
succeed.
first mover?
From the first mover,
Yeah.
is that they can oftentimes use their advantage in the resources to acquire people as they're moving into spaces to compete until they get very big. And then they get to a certain size. And then when you're talking about a marketplace, if you have the people already, it's so hard for someone to enter that space.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a new social platform, right? Like, it's so hard to get people off of the platforms they're already on.
Mm-hmm.
And usually what that takes is, in social media terms, as an example, you have to be doing something very different fundamentally with your platform. And you usually have to appeal to a lot of people that really aren't using whatever it is that's already there. So, and a good example of this is TikTok, which I'm still not super familiar with, but I understand that
It's short videos, I think.
short videos that go away
Yeah.
is kind of it's somewhere
And
in
then
between.
maybe sometimes they don't.
It's like
I mean, if you,
Instagram,
click a button-
Snapchat, and
Vine?
Vine.
Kind of used to be Vine,
yeah.
kind of viney.
But when you have something like TikTok, their user base is very young, and for obvious reasons, because 40-somethings have been on Facebook for a decade, and Twitter or Instagram, whatever they picked for the past 10 years. And as I'm finding out, as you get older, it's harder to change.
Right.
So you get stuck wherever it is you're at.
Yeah.
And even just the reality of like us, maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't, to use TikTok as an example. We're not using it as a company right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the recognition is like, we put all of this time and effort into learn how to do YouTube streams. So if you're going to be making content as part of whatever it is you're doing, it's way harder to be like, all right, well, how do we TikTok?
Yeah,
What's
how
a
do we
YouTube
TikTok?
short? Like,
What's
how
it?
does this work? Wait, our videos are supposed to be less than 3 hours each? I don't know what we're doing. Anyways, so that's a little bit of a joke, but really on this front, you see that, and it's a big move. And this is the angle I was coming at from. I think there's two lines happening, which is what happens to the market in general once there's perfect information.
Yeah.
And there's universal access, right? Essentially, a collectible, as much as we, it disturbs me to say this, collectible or not, I think what happens is these items would then have a tendency to be treated like a commodity. It's a thing that gets made, and like it's not hard to find. Like you always have access to it, and there's always if you list a product that no one has been listing and you list it for $20 and no one buys it, even if everyone thought it was worth $20, it's not worth $20.
Yeah.
Okay, you go down to 15. Okay, you go down to 10. And one of the issues that I think the industry at large is having, there's like some big industry problems that hypothetically, when you start thinking about this kind of space, that could exist and might pop up in the next decade. So mark me on all of the things I'm about to say. The first one that that you mentioned earlier, it shows exactly what we're talking about, which is, you said if you miss on a print run, all of a sudden boxes are going to be available at whatever price, $50, right?
Yeah.
Maybe MSRP is $100. Some store thought, this game's doing great at Fab, whatever it is. I'm going to buy 500 boxes. You buy 500 boxes, you sell 50, and you got 450 sitting there. You list them at $80. Don't sell. Well, how much do you need that money back?
Mm-hmm. And you need it worse than the guy that's listing at 79.
Yep. And there are problems here across the board, which is you have this marketplace, unregulated as it is, and maybe I'm someone who has access to order from a distributor. Maybe I only pay 50%, 55% of MSRP.
Maybe I am a distributor.
Ooh. But maybe you are, all right? You go on, you have some whatever account, you have 3,000 extra boxes, you're like, I'll sell them for $60.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to, or if you're a distributor, or if you can order from a distributor, maybe you are willing to make $5 a box.
Yeah.
Just to sell this thing. Now, there may be, no one will buy it at 55. So maybe that doesn't work either. But
then everybody knows across that entire marketplace.
And it's self-fulfilling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Once that is what happens, like, these aren't worth anything. No one's buying them.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'll just wait until they're free. or whatever they're going to be, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Or it shakes confidence in your game, right? If you're a collectible game, you don't want a $100 box to be worth $50.
Yeah.
As far as I know, that's not the goal.
And if that's the case, it was never a $100 box, right? I mean, that's the crazy thing. Is like you're trying to, I guess, effectively, not necessarily manipulate, but you're trying to generate a certain price that is effectively kind of pulled out of a mix of how many do I print and how much do people want the cards. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, yeah?
Yeah, and people want cards for different reasons, right? People want cards to play them, people want cards to collect them, people want cards to invest in them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like an emperor's no clothes situation.
But you also can't invest unless people want to play or collect them.
Right.
You know, so...
Sure, but like if you print X amount, if the people that are buying it to invest know there's not going to be enough, they'll buy a lot of it. Which then actually furthers the problem. We saw that with Fab, right? $500 boxes before a set came out. It's just like, it's crazy town. But if it's very min-max on the extremes, which is the tough part. And so, that is a very delicate environment to be releasing this kind of an item, right?
Yeah. And what it also does is we've talked about this internally quite a bit. There's this idea of like price integrity and a publisher wanting a certain amount of value to be generated at the retail level to incentivize retailers to sell these products. Yeah. So like if you have let's say you have a $50 product, and no matter what happens at the retail level, publisher makes, let's say, $20 every time they sell that product to a distributor, or maybe direct to a store. So they make $20 no matter what happens after that. Mm-hmm. They're happy with that. But they also know that if they make the $20 and then the distributor makes $5 and then the retailer buys that product, is trying to sell it for $50 and they can only get $28, then the next time that opportunity comes around, they're not going to make their $20 product because nobody's going to be buying it. So publishers have this kind of weird problem where they need the product to be higher value down the retail chain, even though they're making the same amount of money on every one of these releases, presumably. And that's very difficult to do whenever you have things like MSRP as an idea, MAP, minimum advertised price, as an idea. And how do you control that when you have a marketplace that has thousands of retailers on it?
And people,
many of which you can't call up. They might have names different from what the distributor's given whenever they buy the products. So if I'm a Flesh and Blood or a Legend Story, and I'm looking out there and saying like, this retail store listed on TCGPlayer called Danny's Games Incorporated is selling my boxes for $50, and that's going to tank a lot of retail sales for all these other retailers, which means they're not going to want to buy my next product. I got to call Danny's, whatever. You call it up, it's like, I can't get a hold of them. You talk to a distributor and they're like, hey, you don't sell to this guy anymore. And they're like, we don't know Danny's Games because that retailer was buying the product, selling to a subsidiary called Danny's Games, who was then listing it up on TCGPlayer, So, how you police this kind of stuff, and this is why probably Magic dropped the entire concept.
Yeah.
Right? MSRP, and it's like, whatever, it doesn't matter. We can't police it. It's just going to shake out however it shakes out.
I think when the marketplace is big enough, and you have enough people selling it, and enough people buying it, and then needing to sell it after that, it is almost impossible to actually effectively police that.
Yeah. And so here you are.
Yeah.
So what do you do? Now, probably the next step on that is like, well, I probably just have to print way less. I mean, there's really we get back to the reality that the risk of overprinting on anything in this industry is so high that now that there is better and better information over time, it gets riskier and riskier because everybody knows it the moment it happens. It used to be somewhat obscured, right? Fab, as a good example, releases their print numbers a year later, a year and a half later. As more and more people get onboarded into this TCGPlayer POS kind of ecosystem, it's already probably big enough right now for it has a huge impact. But I think we might see a world where 95% of retail is on this system that's selling Fab singles and Fab boxes.
I mean,
or Magic boxes, Magic singles, these kind of things.
It is interesting because I don't know how much it is, but I know TCGPlayer takes a percentage of every transaction. I know Binder POS has a monthly fee, and I don't know if they take a percentage. I'm just trying to scan through to see if I can see it.
And that gets into another great reality, which is that as more and more people get on the platform, the value of the platform gets smaller. because now like
Yep.
you're not able to sell things as easily because 20 other people
Mhm.
are selling the same thing at the same price.
Yeah, and even in a very small microcosm of Fab Singles, so I've been trying to collect those Marvel Dragons recently. So I'm just looking around, keeping my eyes open. A lot of times, general market price on something, $35. Most things are 35 or more listing. Someone walks in, puts it at 28.
Always willing to do that.
Like,
There's
come in,
always
it's
somebody
like,
willing to do that.
I opened this in the draft last night. I want it gone now. I want to make sure this value doesn't tank before I get out from under this thing. Same thing with like 2 weeks in, a retailer has 70 extra boxes and they're like, you know what? A new set of this other game's coming out. I need my money back. I'm going to go on. I'm going to list it for whatever I need to
liquidate,
to get it gone now.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot to that. And I mean, I think that's my question, which is where I want to take this conversation, is actually going a little more macro on the publisher side, which is, if you're, I know early on, TCGPlayer specifically, effectively turned Flesh and Blood down. It's like, we're not going to list this game. Players were asking, it's like, hey, we'd really love you to list this game. We'd love to have a singles market for Flesh and Blood, that kind of thing. And I remember during the 2020 year, essentially it was like, no, we're not interested in it right now.
Yeah.
Okay, move on. And then obviously Fab went crazy. And then there's a lot of interest from everybody just to suddenly add this to the, whatever.
Amazing how it
platforms.
happens after it becomes successful. How many people are
Crazy.
interested? Isn't that funny?
Yeah. But it, one thing after another, it gets added to the platform and so on and so forth. But, I know one of the common critiques of early Fab decision making was, and really it came because there were a lot of people, TCGPlayer included, a lot of stores got sent handwritten notes and lore books and starters from Legend Story Studios, and it ignored it, threw it away, didn't read it, didn't reach out, didn't try the game, couldn't give them time of day, right? And a lot of the same stores I know, after the game went crazy, all of a sudden they're trying to order 200 boxes from the distributor and can't. They're getting upset by it. But one of the critiques, maybe from a lot of those people, maybe I think a lot reasonably, is essentially how many of these products are actually being moved online.
Yeah.
Through Channel Fireball, who was selling Monarch boxes at $500 a box, right? Marketplace through TCGPlayer, not necessarily explicitly through TCGPlayer. I remember for Monarch, they did
They also have kind of a wholesale thing, I guess, where they do bundles.
Yeah,
they can
do
buy
like
directly.
Limited edition direct bundles. With Monarch, they did a really reasonably priced, like it was a box with a couple promos. I think it was like $120. No, it wasn't crazy on terms of like, spiking the price or something. But now you have these two entities that are together. And I don't know what the agreements look like or the supply lines look like or whatever.
And us too. I mean, we're moving boxes online.
Totally.
We're part of that equation.
But we're not together with, in that, but now you have two of those entities together.
Yeah.
That we're doing this. And then you have the whole marketplace and the boxes being listed, and there's this whole thing. And so as a publisher, it's kind of interesting because there has to be some concern of, is this even how you would like your product to enter the market place? And that's kind of like zooming out for me, is like, it can, if you're a small publisher and you can leverage all access to all these retail stores and this audience and all these players who are using this marketplace already, that might be very appealing. But at the same time, like, it just makes it, if I were a publisher and I was thinking, like, let's say we're going to make the Covenant TCG or whatever it is. We're not, by the way. That's just an example. But if we were,
when we retire, I think it'd be a nice project.
Let's say we were, and you're trying to make a collectible game, which so much of this industry, so many stores, one of the knock-on effects I was going to mention earlier is like, if access to information, availability to this stuff lowers the price so aggressively, you could easily get to a point where it's no longer feasible for a lot of the stores that currently exist because of that ecosystem to exist.
Yeah, and what's funny about that though is that is the actual price of the good, right? It's like it's not that it's wrong; it's that it's accurate.
Yeah, and you see this in other industries. Think about the hotel game. Like, okay, there's a very specific example. I'm planning a trip to go to Europe for the Pro Tour for Fab, and wife's bucket list, she wants to see Coldplay before they stop touring. So this is their last tour. So they happen to be in Scotland around the same time we're going to be around. Of course,
until their return, their comeback tour.
I don't know. They're like 40. So they're
you've seen like
they'll do more
or whatever.
I'm sure they'll do more shows, but they're saying at least
it's at their prime though.
That they're like, this is their retirement show as a band. And then like maybe they do, maybe they don't, but like they're not planning to do more albums, that kind of stuff.
And now you've seen Coldplay and you thought it was a fantastic show.
They did.
Right?
They put on a really good show.
Okay.
Yeah, they earned the dollars for that one. But there's a concert happening in Edinburgh, Scotland, which is not a giant place. So you look at hotels around the time of the concert, very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You look at hotels one day later, half price.
Yeah.
Right? Supply demand. But you also have there's a marketplace. So you can go to hotels.com, you can use Google, you can use Priceline.
Absolutely.
And previously, maybe even with Google in the early days, maybe I would have searched like hotel close to Edinburgh Airport.
Yeah.
Or wherever the concert venue
made
is.
A few
right?
emails. Yeah.
Then I'd pick one, I'd reserve it, off to the races. But now I have perfect information.
Yeah.
What hotels are available? What are the prices? So then that increases competition, which right now I feel like mostly and that's why I said commodities earlier, because everyone's selling the same good.
Yeah.
It's not like you're choosing between, and even though they're very similar at this point, like an iPhone or an Android.
Sure.
Like you have very different product realities there.
Yeah, like in your hotel example, it's not that every hotel is the same. So you might have one of them over here for $120, which is not the cheapest because you also have this $80 one listed on, Google Hotels or whatever. But the $120 hotel might be worth $120 to you, whereas the Fab Box at $120 or $80 is the same Fab Box. There is no higher end Fab Box.
That's what makes it a commodity.
Yeah.
Essentially, even though its traditional definition of commodity good would not fit to a collectible booster box.
Yeah.
But as a
easy
retailer,
word,
both trying to sell it, it is the exact same thing. The hotel down the road, though, might have free breakfast and free Wi-Fi, and like it looks cleaner and it's in a safer area. And there's a lot of differences between the. Maybe I just care about the $80, but all that to say, right now, the biggest variable that retailers have to compete with is price.
Yeah.
It's almost exclusively price.
Yeah, because we can assume, I think every player generally assumes, certainly through TCGPlayer right now, if you buy something, I think they have a guarantee and security, and they're making sure the marketplace is making these things happen. The box is going to ship out in a day or two. It's going to be packaged normally. It's going to use a basic shipping service, USPS, UPS, FedEx, and it's going to have tracking whenever it ships. And like that's universal service.
Yep.
Period.
Yeah.
So how else are you going to compete unless on price? It's like we have this conversation all the time, right? The subscription service is very good in certain ways compared to a traditional transaction, right? You can guarantee the supply of something. You don't have to pre-order to get things on, around release day. You can have kind of this perfect understanding that I'm going to get this many of this quantity. I can lock it in now. I know that I'll get charged automatically. I don't have to think about buying the next set, buying the next set, buying the next set, et cetera. There are some real good benefits there. But still, at the end of the day, we're also just selling that same good. We're just attaching a lot of service benefits to the front end.
Yeah.
And barring like a new way of doing sales, like we're doing with subscriptions, the retail sale online is the retail sale online.
Yeah.
A la carte sales,
And
buy it, pack it up.
of course, one really natural advantage, especially local retailers have, is they're local.
Yeah.
So like sometimes I order singles on TCGPlayer. And so sometimes it takes 2 weeks or it takes a week even. But if I have a tournament this Saturday, 2 weeks, or a week even doesn't matter, right? I need it today. Or if I want to order a box, I had a friend actually play in a tournament a couple weeks ago who got a game loss in a tournament because one of their cards turned out to be a fake.
Oh, really?
Totally a fake card. He traded for it, had no idea.
Interesting.
And then it made the in the sleeve feel was a little stiffer. And so like you could almost squeeze the side of your deck and kind of know where it was at and maybe even cut to a very specific point. He was shocked, of course.
Yeah.
But one reality that you have, if you have a local retailer who bought from distributor, who bought from publisher, or a retailer who bought from publisher, there's an authenticity that's guaranteed. Even if all their singles came from that same supply line, you're buying the genuine article. And you have the fact that it's local, right? So you don't have to ship it. It can't get, if I buy a box on your shelf, it's that box. It's not going to get damaged.
Advantage of local retail has always been in the moment sales.
But as we learned back in 2013 with Star Wars X-Wing, you can have a phenomenal place to play the game. You can run daily events or weekly tournaments. You can have the supply in stock. You can have all this support. And you're buying a $10 item that you can maybe get for $8 online. Okay. I don't have to have it shipped at the time. I don't pay shipping. It's right here. I want, I play here, so I'll support you. But a new set came out. I had a really good friend, like really good. And it's like, I'm going to buy it from you, but making you aware that like I'm paying $45 extra to buy it from you out of $200.
It's a lot to ask. I mean, and it's that sideways value.
Yeah.
It's like, because I'm paying $45 for your space to exist, not because this is worth it.
And it's something we've always talked about being off about the industry, which is it's so weird that stores essentially are making the case overpay for product A to get service B.
Yeah.
And it's not like a pre-added service to product A. It's kind of a supplementary thing that you want from this thing. But that's where I got back to the earlier point of if the price pressure gets so intense, then there's a lot of stores that I think that are going to really struggle to exist, that maybe currently exist. And like, even from a TCG standpoint, if enough of the retailers are on it, it's actually going to make it, like you said, it's helpful in some ways to have a marketplace that does all this automation. You can sell it to the whole world. So you get to broaden your audience to the whole world.
Yeah.
But
then how do you compete?
That's the problem. And the only way you compete
is price.
As an example, if we're both selling the same item on TCGPlayer, there's only one way to compete.
That's right.
It's price, and I better have all positive reviews, and you better have all positive reviews on your account.
Yeah.
So you have to kill it. I mean, that's one of the upsides of like all the internet with hotels too, right? I can go see 500 reviews on a hotel.
Yeah.
That didn't exist 20 years ago. Like you had to get a referral, a travel agent, like all sorts of stuff to like make sure you were staying at a nice place. They're going to take care of you. But because it's all online, the consumer gets a lot of power in that example, regardless of what actually happened or the scenario, or if a lot of times the most frustrated customers in my experience have been, they had the wrong expectations, even though you say it up front or you try to say it up front, and then they don't get what they expect. Now they're frustrated.
Yeah.
And now they can go online and post a review that anyone else who's considering doing business with you can look at.
Actually, I saw an article very recent, I think it was in the New York Times, as a business article about there's a new thing that is not new, but effectively extortion via reviews, public reviews, where, people will actively say, if you don't do this, I will leave you a 1-star review on Google, Facebook. We dealt with this a lot. And you basically are like, well, I can ship the $100 product or whatever that they're demanding, even though in our, terms, expectations, et cetera, this is not how the deal is supposed to work. Or I suffer the brand consequences of this person who, and many people lightly offended or lightly confused can try to tank your reputation.
Yeah.
And so that is a big thing that is out there, barring your, or at least piggybacking on your point there. But what does it do? What does it do to the space? Because even if I'm Legend Story, man, and I'm thinking, I want to support this retail chain because I want in-store gameplay and marketing, and yet 80% of the product that's going to the retail chain is going back up to online through TCGPlayer Marketplace. Why would I not just sell that myself? Right? Like, there's no reason not to do that at a certain point. And so then do you try to say, we'll only sell to you if you don't sell on TCGPlayer or you don't have an online outlet? Because that's impossible to police. Do you somehow, how do you manage or police the product that you're sending to retailers being retail product and not online, race to the bottom situation? It's crazy, right?
If I had the answer, I think it'd be great.
So what do you do? I mean, what happens all of this?
That's the grand question, right? And
it's been happening the whole time, but this is just kind of an inflection point where it's like there's a big move here that is going to accelerate, I think, this understanding that all of the retail chain is probably headed for online viability in the next couple of years.
I would be surprised if most retailers didn't have some online footprint already.
Yeah,
it's just the difference is a centralized marketplace, right?
Yeah.
Which eBay had the same advantage. They just were an online marketplace for everything, and then TCGPlayer has very specific tools built to make it easy to participate. But they're
And
making
it's so easy to buy
so easy.
and so easy to sell.
Yep, which is, as a marketplace, that's your goal.
Absolutely.
Like, you want perfect information, you want maximum availability, you want it super easy to buy and sell, because they're making their money by every transaction. So the easier it is to buy and sell, the more transactions, the more players on there, the more retailers on there, the more products you have listed, the more, and it's a cyclical thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's where the bigger questions for me, there's two layers that I think need to be asking the questions here. It's not the player, because the player, you cannot expect that X-Wing example I gave earlier to me was a perfect reality check. And that's kind of haunted the back of my brain space forever, because that is when that point I was still a little bit maybe ambitiously optimistic. I'll say that.
You find yourself there sometimes.
Yeah, and it was before I just. Since then, it's clear. It's like you just really can't make the argument. You should buy thing A from me at overprice, so that I exist.
Yeah,
That's just eventually that's a losing argument, and this is just furthering that exact point. Because the question from the player perspective, all they're asking is, how do I get what I want, and what's the most effective way for me to get it? And then by effective, I mean easy, best price, how I want to be getting it, whatever that looks like, right?
Yeah, usually best price, all things equal.
If it's 2 Uprising booster boxes for Flesh and Blood, sealed, I'm looking for best price.
Yeah.
And maybe speed. Do I want the decks? Do I want them right now? Maybe I go down to the local store and see if they have them in stock.
Yeah.
Can I wait 4 days? And I look at the price difference, like, well, if I'm buying 4 boxes, $20 extra, is it worth $80 to get it today versus Friday or whatever day it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually not. So the people that I think need to be asking the questions are retailers and publishers. So let's talk about retailers for a second.
Yeah.
So the reality of retailers, though, is if you've got 50 boxes of Uprising sitting there that you paid $50 for, and there's a new set of a next game you want, and you having that cash means you could buy the next game that you think will actually generate profit for you. Even if hypothetically every retailer in the world came to the conclusion that, you know what, this massive online marketplace is driving the prices down. So it would be better if no one was using this.
If we all abandoned it.
Yeah, if every retailer just was like, you know what, I'm only selling stuff in my store.
Yeah.
That would make it easier for every store in the world.
And it would be better for the ones who didn't do that.
Right.
You know?
They would be dunking, right? But that's why it doesn't work. Because if one breaks,
Yeah.
all of a sudden you see the boxes selling online for $100 and you have 20 sitting there.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we're right back into the same position.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. And then also publishers, because like you said, and this goes back to, I used this example on stream a month or two back, because I think the reality as a publisher, I really don't think there's anything you can do to police this from happening. Because if you're selling it to retailers, you're selling it to players, they can do whatever they want with the product, particularly players, but even retailers. You can get them to sign an agreement, but it's like, I can sell my friend Steven each box for $100 because I will not sell it for less than $100. Let's say I agree to that. And a lot of places, by the way, MAP is not legal to even try to enforce.
Yeah.
Price
like
fixing
price
and all
fixing,
that
et cetera. Yeah.
So, but even let's say you can. It's like, you know what, Zach, you have to charge $100 to sell this box. I'm like, all right, I'll sell it, Steven, for $100. I only pay $50. I have my $50 profit. I'm feeling good, knowing that you're going to go sell it on the marketplace for whatever you can get for it.
Right.
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 And then you work out whatever the deal is on the back end to make it
I get
work.
25
Yeah.
from
It's like,
you.
it's a whole nightmare situation, right?
Yeah.
So there's only actually, and I'm going to come back to it. There's one solution. If that is the ecosystem you want to create, product at retail, not at basement prices, etc. And the solution is you print a certain amount, you supply the market with some percentage of it, 30%, 40%, 50%. Send it out to the market. And if that product if it's sitting on shelves and it goes down to some crazy low price, you burn the rest. Next time you print less. Print even less. Print less than you sold this time.
Which is just wild.
Yeah. Or let's say...
And can't be right.
Let's say you send 30% out. Sells out immediately. And everyone knows that, like, if it sells out immediately, in 2 weeks, there's going to be more. So you can't be like, there's only going to be this much. If I get it now, I'm going to be able to sell it for $1,000 in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now, if needed, the next wave's coming down the pipe. So you release it. 2 weeks later, you go from 30% of it sent out to 50%. 2 weeks later to 70%. At some point, it's going to slow down. It's not moving as much. And whatever's left, you can sit on it. Just let it sit there for a minute. A couple months, see how you're doing. Maybe one last little kiss of supply. Burn the last 20, 30%.
But honestly, burning the last 20 to 30% is probably non-profitable release.
It depends. But if it's not, then the alternative is do exactly what you're doing and hope that there's enough momentum in the system that this is going to keep getting bought and sold.
I mean, do publishers of these kinds of games just have to accept that we're going to cap our player base and be okay with it rather than grow ever? It's like if we assume we have 10,000 players, we're going to print 20,000 boxes, and there's going to be some of those 10,000 players that aren't going to get everything they want.
I mean, I think there's a lot of answers to that, but you probably, if you're a genuine, like I said, we were planning a TCG and how we would go to market. I think there has to be some introductory product that's just always available, and you don't care if it's basement prices. It's the introductory product. You'll stock it yourself. Any retailer that wants to buy it, they can stock it, and like fine. I picture in Fab if Welcome to Wraith was just that product.
Yeah,
that this set or a history pack. It's like this set always available. We'll keep reprinting it. We'll keep making it available. Do whatever you want with it. Yeah,
and at that point, just see, it all comes back to like, this is also artificial. Like, just release History 1 as a block of cards that's 3 of everything. Forget the booster packs. If it's an introductory set, just give everybody the cards they need. Charge $150, buy direct from Legend Story.
You could even have starter decks that are fully playable, constructed, ready, fixed. It's like, pick your hero. We'll send you a deck. You can start playing today.
Yeah.
But you have to have something that is available for people so they can get in. That product should exist anyway.
Yeah, absolutely should.
Like Bravo looks cool to you. Buy the Bravo deck. It's $50 maybe. It's a full deck. It's got some nice shiny equipment. Playable. Great.
Yeah. Full constructed deck every hero that releases.
So there's ways to address that bit, and it comes back to like, why are we doing collectible? And the reality is, the reason we're doing collectible is because it's the most powerful economic model in tabletop gaming.
Which is effectively, it means to say we're getting more than just players involved, which means there's a bigger audience that we can sell these things to.
Well, and even to players, like the average amount of TCG player spends to play a game is much higher than like an LCG.
Yeah, so then this goes back to like, could you sell an LCG pack for $100 to accomplish the same thing? So it's also just player psychology. It's just strictly that we're willing to spend more to get the components that we need to play this game compared to other games that we could buy.
And it's partially psychology, but it's also partially practical, because if I buy a $200 card, then my expectation is if I decide I'm not into this anymore, I could maybe sell that $200 card. Whereas an LCG, unless it goes out of print and the game goes away and it's 5 years from now and suddenly people are interested in Netrunner again, you buy a pack for $15, you open it, it is not worth $15. It's like a new car going off a lot.
Sure.
It's like, because I can buy that $15 pack fresh from anywhere. Who knows what happened to your cards? And like, why would I not buy this fresh? It's going to have to be a lower price, right? So, but yeah, it is a reality of like, if there's tens of thousands of people playing a game and they all want one card to play the game with, and there's a finite amount of those cards, it's worth a lot more than if there's infinite number of cards that can be printed and bought of that thing.
Yeah, which helps you if you have the card that you pull out of a $3 pack and you suddenly have $200 out of 3. But for
good
the
value
9,500 players who buy all those packs and don't get the $200 card, they are now netting, like they're negative 200 if they want to play with it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just like so weird.
Yeah, it is. Again, the collectible model on the macro is interesting, but the recognition is we kind of end at this end game state, which is if you have a perfect information and total accessibility to every player in the world from every retailer in the world, the one thing they have left is price. Yeah. And it's going to go down to the actual price, which is what whoever is willing to sell it at the least is willing to sell it for, and send it to whoever is buying it.
Yeah. But then and you get into this weird cycle where eventually singles prices are so low that it's not worth opening a booster box to make singles happen. And then if you run out of your supply of singles worldwide because nobody's opened booster boxes, then those prices go up and then you can start opening booster boxes again.
Yep.
But it could also be that like single prices go low and they stay there forever because everybody opened a bunch of booster boxes up front and there's not the demand, or opening the packs is greater value than buying the single. And it's like, what this all comes down to is collectibles started not intentionally, right? Like the first album by the Beatles was not like the Beatles saying, you know what, we're going to make a collectible album.
Yeah.
They were just trying to make something that people want to listen to. And then it just so happened they could only print 500 because they couldn't afford anymore. They didn't think it would sell. And now suddenly it's a collectible. So there's this idea of like intentional collectability that really, I think I will never understand. And when I never understand something, Zach, I feel like it's because I'm getting bamboozled.
Well, the reality is, this is kind of a good head into a good end point for
I will
me.
say the only thing that I can appreciate about this format is sealed and draft.
Sure. Which I
That
think
is
is a
the
big
whole
upside.
reason to have randomness in a pack.
Yeah. Well, you go back to the creation of Magic, right? None of these conversations, I think, were really fully fleshed out at that point. But the reality was baseball cards were around. And the question came up like, well, what if you could use those baseball cards to play a game?
Right.
Like, that would be cool. So someone made that game.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, I remember hearing Richard Garfield talk at that Keyforge keynote. We made it, the assumption was that people wouldn't own everything.
Yeah.
So you'd sit down to a table and you'd see cards you'd never seen before when you played against an opponent. And how cool is it that we all have different collections and we can all bring whatever is unique to the table? And so I think with a lot of TCGs, you know, at the time back then, there weren't other TCGs to emulate. But even now, you look at something like Sorcery and Eric, and it's a huge passion project for them. And it's even with James and Flesh and Blood. It's like when I was a kid in the 90s, it was literally magical to get to play
all
new
nostalgia
things and explore it. And so why did James make Flesh and Blood, right? And it's like in my mind, and they have the Flesh and Blood and the mission statement, all that stuff, but like loves these card games, loves this format, loves everything about what's going on here.
Yeah, it's like familiar and it's nostalgic.
And
Which
so
are kind of the same thing.
Why are you using this format? I think there's the nostalgic, there's the feeling reasons, there's the, I'm just, you know, in my mind, you can't expect your game, a new TCG, to be radically successful to the point where you have mass adoption and all this stuff going on, right? You're just trying to make a great game that you enjoy, that you think other people would enjoy, and that hopefully some number of players and retailers and stuff care about enough to actually play the game, have communities, get together, and experience those things, right? It just so happens that we've seen what the non-collectible model does for an expandable game from the publisher side. And it's a very challenging model to actually pursue because there is actually so little money being generated. So when you talk about being bamboozled, it's kind of interesting for me because I get the argument you could always make about collectible games is like, well, if I'm buying 400 cards in a booster box, it's cheaper for the publisher if they just printed those 400 cards and handed them to me. And can't you just give me a play set of all these things? Like, it is cheaper for the publisher. No doubt.
And cheaper for the player.
And cheaper for the player. But the reality of it is, if you want 3 or 4 sets with 200 or 300 cards in it every year that all have different pieces of art, and you want organized play, and you want tournaments, and you want prizes, and you want these communities to happen, you want retail stores to exist that can actually exist and have a space, at somewhere in there, you've got to pay for it.
Yeah, there's got to be more money collected somehow.
Yeah, and that's where, like with collectible games, for me, the amount of time I get to utilize my Flesh and Blood cards, for example, in that experience, is worth disproportionately more than I'm having to pay for it.
Yeah, but see, we're back into the same problem that we're talking about with retailers selling overpriced products so people can pay for a play space. It's like what we're doing on the collectible market is on booster boxes is we're paying for organized play, we're paying for art assets, we're paying for design teams, but not directly. We're paying for it through a secondary mechanism that is overpriced access to cards that could easily be accessed in a cheaper way. And they're just baking that into the chain.
Which I would be really curious if you could get away with charging what you would need to charge for products and events to make that actually possible.
Well, that's where it comes back to psychology.
Yeah.
Because it's like
Which
players
is super important.
Players are willing to pay for that when they don't know they're paying for it, and they think they're paying for the opportunity to open a $200 card, but they would be unwilling to pay for it if it was overtly $100 if you want organized play tournaments, etc.
Yeah.
Like, and so that is where it becomes, we can make something happen, and I don't want to say tricking, but by playing to the psychology of collecting to effectively bake these costs into a model that would otherwise not be supported.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating, man.
And, there are, like you mentioned, there are other upsides, like the fact you get sealed and draft. I know plenty of people that play Flesh and Blood, don't own anything. They're willing to pay $20 to play in that sealed event. They're going to sell anything they get. And that's part of the upside is like, yeah, I'm paying more, but with an understanding that in this ecosystem that exists in a collectible game, that there's actually, versus an LCG, right? Any given LCG card, you're really not worth anything. And so, not that the worth is why I'm here, but it is for some people. It's that reality. Like, I'll pay $100 a booster box. I'll get a case. It's like, I'll either get what I want, or if I don't get what I want, I can trade for it, or I can sell. I'm only looking to do A, B, or C. And so, I don't know, you get all of these weird nuances that you don't get with an LCG.
But it also does come down to the fact that I could hit something really valuable.
Sure.
If that chance didn't exist, there would be no collectible model.
Yeah. I
right?
mean, it's
you're willing to take a bet. It's like a lotto ticket, man. I mean, it is like, it's just straight up gambling in some degree. I understand it's not definition-wise exactly gambling.
In the same way that, like, looking for the golden ticket in a Wonka bar is.
Well, I was going to say, in the same way that people are spending millions of dollars on Diablo Immortal, this video game, buying loot boxes at the random 1 in a million chance they get this special gem.
Yeah.
And that's all digital. Like, it's even worse. It's like a computer just randomly spitting out. It's like a slot machine. But people, that's the thing, is people are willing to do it. In the case of Diablo Immortal, in the case of all the way the video game ecosystem has gone to DLCs and random, you could get something cool in this chest. In the way that entire genres of video games are built around, you might randomly find something in off of a drop of a boss, right? World of Warcraft. Hey, I'm playing for 16 hours. I'm paying $20 a month. And maybe this time, the 60th time I've killed this giant, I get this sword that is digitally created that makes me a little bit better at getting the next sword, right? Like, it's everywhere. I understand, but and that is maybe just the reality of how human beings operate, particularly when it comes to recreation, where it's just like, I want to spend my money like this. I like the excitement of it. Like, when we were playing craps in Vegas, it was like I had no intention of winning any money.
Yeah, I was hoping to break even.
It's like
But that's where, like, even that's literally gambling.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, I went into that experience, and this is just my take on it, is I had money that I was perfectly willing to part with, that I'm looking to stand here and learn how to play craps and understand the game and play this game for a couple hours.
Yeah. And hang out with Matt.
And hang out with my friends.
Everyone around the table.
And like, if I end up walking away and I lost the money I brought here, that's the cost of that good time.
Yeah.
Right. But like, you could ask the same question. It's like, well, couldn't you just like pay $20 or $40 and like, can't we just play craps for 3 hours?
Mm-hmm. And you could.
And you could.
Technically.
Right. But
there's an element of stakes to it that kind of gets the excitement.
That's literally gambling. I think one of the big lines in the sand for me too, I know a lot of people, and I'm curious if you're listening to this and you have opinions, head to our Discord. I'd love to hear from you on this one. But a lot of people consider booster packs and TCG models predatory or gambling or that kind of thing. And I always make the case, it's like, if I pay $100 for a booster box, I don't know what I'm getting, but I do know that I'm going to walk away with 300 or 400 cards.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm gambling on what they are, but I'm not gambling like when I buy a lotto ticket. When I buy a lotto ticket, it's most of the time it's either I win money or I lost my money. It's a zero sum situation. So I get it. I do get. And if you're uncomfortable with the psychology game being played, but if you are, let me tell you, if say for 98+% of the industry, if the collectible model didn't exist, I don't think the industry exists like we know it today. Yeah. Like it's just, it's crazy how actual foundational it is. So just from a real big picture, I think practically as a publisher or as someone who wants to see this industry be successful and be around, it's worth also walking through the exercise of what is the answer to that, because I do not think the vast majority of people are willing to pay what it would cost to have these experiences whether it's the game or the store experience or the event experience, directly.
Well, the entire thing has to shift.
Totally.
For that to be the case,
in the current situation, it's got to be radically different in order for people to be willing to directly pay for it.
Yeah. So the way that actually could work, which is relevant to the 3.0 conversations we're having on the retail level, the way that it actually could work is that the publisher gets their $40 per box sold. Fine. The retailer sells it for $50 or $45. They make nothing on it. They're just a a movement across the chain, but they're charging $10 to $15 for an event where you come to a really nice space, you play. You're not making hardly any money on retail sales, if any at all, or maybe there's some secondary sales you can make.
And retail might be heading there even if they don't want to be heading there.
Yeah, I mean maybe retail just is gone effectively, but if you can host the organized play that people want, if you can create an environment that people want to be in, and you say, if you want to be here playing with these cards that you've saved a ton of money on, pay the $15 to go here, pay the $150 to go to an event in Vegas, and those costs have to be covered for those organized play things to happen. You've got to bring in a lot more money on the player buy-in for those individual things than you do in cost. In terms of how much it costs to host it. It's like not every other, but most other marketplaces, organized play in this industry could and would exist if players are willing to pay for organized play. And if they're not, then it doesn't.
Yeah.
And rather than obscuring that behind kind of an interesting, exciting chase of this or that card, out of a sense of nostalgia and just familiarity, you could shift the entire ecosystem. Publisher makes the same amount. Retailers make nothing on a retail sale. They make up the difference in organized play directly at the store level. Whether or not that would even work or how in the world you orchestrate that is impossible.
And, other notes.
Sometimes it's the best we've got.
Yeah.
Collectible games.
Other notes on that too are it does, in that this hypothetical different model environment, right, is... There are people, we talk about the game outside the game of deck building, which is a game outside the game we like. But I go back to the collector. And there are a lot of people that...
They're just excited about the idea that collecting, I might have rare stuff.
Yeah, and also these are Venn diagrams. So there are people that are all the things. There are people that are players and collectors, and they lean one direction or another. But, you can, even if you don't have anyone to play with, you can buy a box and open it. And you can collect this game. And you can go to the big event. You can play when you get there. But, it does offer... everything from limited and draft to different ways of appreciating the game without it just being the player side. And so there's a lot of nuance baked in.
Yeah, and it is worth noting that the scavenger hunt that is collecting doesn't exist in a fixed distribution model.
Yep.
So, you can't collect an LCG set. But it is interesting and fun for people to find and put together things that are kind of scattered across the world. People love doing that. Yeah. And God bless them. Let that continue. It's wonderful. It happens in every different kind of way. And so there is just strictly that element of randomness in packs. It's you give people a fun little scavenger hunt to do every set that comes out.
I think one of your long tail problems with it is exactly what you're saying earlier about the Beatles' first vinyl, is that inherently, if it becomes literally about the chase, the inherent thing you're making seems to lose the allure and the value of are you just trying to make a great game that people sit across the table from each other and enjoy?
Yeah.
And is that what you're trying to do? And if so, why are we spending so much time focused on these other things, right? Well, can't you just make a great game and people will buy it? But I think that's the reality check is... And this is not just true of games. The best products, the best services don't always win.
Yeah.
Right? In my opinion, and no shade at all to Magic the Gathering. I think it changed the industry. It would not be what it is today without it. Tons of games and creators and designers and tons of people I've met wouldn't be around if that game had never existed. Truly grateful that it existed. But I do not think Magic the Gathering is anywhere near the best game in the world.
Yeah, currently it is. It can't be... seeing. If you divorce all of the history and if you just have a lineup of 5 different games and you look at them mechanically and in terms of experiences they create at the table.
Even if you took if you could, Men in Black people, forget all your experiences, and then you showed people your 5 favorite games. Let's say Magic's one of them. And
Magic, Netrunner, Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, you show 1,000 people 5 different games. Which game is going to be their favorite? And I don't think Magic wins that vote.
Yeah.
Like, you play it, I don't think it does. So the reason I say that, though, is that there are so many more factors beyond making a great game to having a great game that can actually be created sustainably and continue to be made and continue to create those experiences, especially when we talk about these expandable games, is why all of these conversations actually take up so much space.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about, I've seen so many great games that were not successful.
Yeah.
Like, just phenomenal games.
So we're well out of time, but I got to ask the final question, though, like, on this, because the collector element of it is very relevant. It's the thing that is redeeming the idea of the model to me, is that, you create this kind of exciting, I remember, and I will continue to mention this, tracking down all of the cards that I needed to complete my, like, Fleer 1994 X-Men Marvel 17 binder page perfect 9x9 grid, or 3x3 grid, was extremely fun. Going to conventions and seeing, oh, they got the 94. Okay, do they have the Archangel that I need? Oh, they do. Oh my gosh, it's $15. I'm going to buy. That was intoxicatingly fun. And I have fond memories of doing that. And I still have the finished product in my, room at home. And I can open that binder up and be like, I remember how much I love this.
Did it.
And I would sit there and stare at it for hours and just think about the stories being created and who's shooting who. And this is all the way down here is interacting with this up here. Absolutely love it. But I got to tell you, if I could just hop on the TCGPlayer.com marketplace and find 16,000 Archangels that I needed and just buy the cheapest one, I don't think it's as fun anymore.
It's not.
So are you also cutting the legs out from the idea of collectability in the collector sense, in that all you got to do, you want to collect this set? You go to this website and click the button.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer, yes. It is less fun.
Yeah.
Because, like, discovering something or finding something or really wanting something for a super long time, and finally, maybe you've never even seen it in person, right? There are elements of that are really, as a collector, really enjoyable. At the same time, reality of that, though, is like I did a lot of, in the past decade, buying various stuff for old games we used to play to kind of finish out stuff I wanted or get decks built that I wanted. And, like, there is, as a collector, my version of collecting is not just collecting the pieces. Like, I'm usually collecting things that are usable. Like, I have collections of these old games that we play, and I have decks available so that if I ever want to play it, wherever I'm ever talking to someone, it's like, back in my day, we used to play the Star Wars games. Did you ever hear of it? And they're like, yeah, but I never got to play it. And it's like, oh, you want to play it? I have it. Like, it's like the old vinyl, right? It's like, this is like this is a first printing of a Beatles Abbey Road album. Like, isn't that crazy? You want to listen to it? For me. But there's a lot of collectors that don't do that piece. And so I do think it is, if there's utopian existence where the only place I could find these products are in the various local stores I go to. Yeah. And, like, you go to conventions and maybe that's the big marketplace, and I'm just on the hunt for that cold foil, whatever that I really want. There's very few of them. As a collector, that is way more exciting.
Yeah.
But you can't stop the internet.
Yeah, sure. And that's where the whole collectible thing is like, ooh, I mean, is it really going to maintain from what Magic was able to do for the next 10 years as these kinds of developments like TCGPlayer is doing, and this integration and making it more and more and more and more available? Is it really going to be able to maintain the appeal that it once had?
We'll find out.
Man, crazy times. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and hope you enjoyed the conversation. Big moves in the space. Gosh, I just think things are going to change so much in the next 5 years. And every time I say that, they continue to remain the same in so many ways. We appreciate you listening. We'll talk to you next time. Until then, keep playing.